Today I'm joined by Mark Allen, six-time Ironman world champion and ESPN said the greatest triathlete in history. Welcome, Mark.
Great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Awesome, Mark. I heard you spoke in a podcast that your love for sport was sparked at the 1968 Olympics when you saw the swimming competition. You took up swimming. And then how did you get from swimming to triathlon?
Yeah, in 1968, I watched the Mexico City Olympics. It was the first Olympics that I'd actually ever seen on television. You know, way back then, there was not many sport programs. And so the thing that really attracted my attention was the swimming and the distance swimming in particular. You know, the men were swimming 1,500 meters, the women 800 meters in their longest races. And at that time, I was about 10 years old. And for me to swim one lap across the pool was a near death experience. You know, I could barely swim one length. And so to see these athletes just going, 50 meters back and forth, it just blew my mind. Like, wow, it's amazing what somebody can do when they train right. And a couple of months later, there was the local swim team where I was in the city that I lived in California was having tryouts and for people to come and kids to come and see if they wanted to be part of the team. And my mom said, why don't you go there and just, try it and see. And I thought, I can only swim one lap. And she goes, no, just go try. And so I went and I actually was able to kind of go back and forth a few times. And that one day turned into 12 years of swimming. I swam from the time I was 10 all the way through university, but I was never at any kind of a world-class level. I just don't have the genetics to swim really fast. If you look at Michael Phelps or any of the big swimmers, they're tall, they have this incredible shoulder flexibility. Their knees bend backwards, their feet are like big flippers. I didn't have any of that. 2 years after I stopped competing as a swimmer, a very similar thing happened. I was watching sports on television and I saw the Ironman triathlon. It was in February of 1982. I was 24 years old. And I was, again, watching people doing this incredible endurance event. And I thought, these people are nuts. I mean, it's, a race that can take up to 17 hours to complete. And it blew my mind that the human body could do that. And it was the same thing. About a couple of weeks after I saw the Ironman on television, I thought, I have to go to that race. It's the Ironman in Hawaii. I have to go there and see if I can be one of those people to cross the finish line. And about 9 months after that, I got a bike, I started training, and I was in Hawaii to do the Ironman for the very first time.
And that's when you got hooked with the triathlon.
Yeah. And, it was one of those turning points in my life that had no logical reason behind it. I just had this feeling like I have to go to the Ironman in Hawaii and see if I can be one of those finishers of that amazing race.
Yeah. And I imagine it must have been throughout your career it must have been a little bit of a love-hate relationship, because the Ironman in Hawaii was also the one that you won as one of the last competitions in your athletic career. But then you won it 6 times.
Yeah, it was, I had a long history there. Over the course of my triathlon career, I raced in Hawaii 12 times. And out of those, the first 6 years that I raced in Kona, in Hawaii, I had, I could finish second, I could finish third, I finished fifth, but I could never win it. I was able to be in the lead at the end of the bike. I was able to be in the lead, halfway through the marathon even within 5 kilometers of the finish. But every year something was happening that was preventing me from winning. I could be strong in the beginning and then I would fall apart at the end. And a lot of years I ended up walking on the marathon. And if you're trying to win the world championship in Hawaii and you're walking on the marathon, you're not going to win it, And so it was very difficult because those first 6 years that I raced in Kona, I devoted, basically the entire season to really building my fitness and focus and putting everything into trying to be the champion on that one day, and it wasn't working out. And so each year I had to come back home afterwards. And of course I had, some disappointment. You think you're ready to win the championship, and you end up walking on the marathon. And it was very hard to sort of say, okay, can I do it again? Can I take a whole another year and put all that training in and go back again? And fortunately each year I did find a reason to go back, but then kind of after that sixth year of trying and failing at that goal, I really had to ask myself, maybe it's just not for me. There's some dreams that we have that we're just never going to achieve, and at some point you have to kind of say, okay, I've given it a good try. It's not going to happen. Let me move on to the next thing in my life. And I was really at that point, and I almost didn't go back. I almost said, forget it. It's not worth the training. I'm going to go to other races around the world where I know that I can have success. And I thought, you know what? Maybe I will never win that race, but I also know that I have never had my best race. And so preparing for my 7th Ironman, I said, I have to go back, and there's one reason, and that's to just have a great swim, bike, and run all on one day. And if I win, great. If I don't win, I don't care. But I just want to have a race where from the start to the finish, I stay strong. And so that was my focus as I trained and went into that 7th Ironman. And that ended up being the year that I did win for the first time.
Yeah. Did that also take the pressure a little bit off, that you said, I'm not focusing on the outcome, but I much rather focus on I do it as good as I can?
Absolutely. Yeah, it was a very different year. I stopped worrying about all the other guys who were training. I stopped worrying about Dave Scott, who was my biggest rival. By 1989, he had won 6 Ironman titles, and so he knew how to race it. He knew how to win it. And I thought, if my only goal that has meaning at that race is to win, there's only one person who's going to do that. And so the chance of achieving that goal is pretty small. And so it really did take the pressure off, because I could just focus on getting myself fit, focus on how I was going to race it to have, at the end of the day, the best race that I possibly could. And so even at the start of the race that year, in 1989, I was floating in the ocean, just waiting for the start. And it was the first year that I actually kind of was there, and I was looking around and seeing the island and seeing the volcano that's right there, and just looking around and seeing how beautiful and blue the ocean was. And it was the first year that I really appreciated how amazing the island of Hawaii was. And I felt like I was a part of the island instead of this place that was so intense. And I felt, in the earlier years, I didn't feel at home there. And so there was a big shift. And it kind of went back to my reasons for being a swimmer. I knew as a swimmer that I wouldn't, early on, I could see I was never going to be an Olympic gold medalist. I was never even going to qualify to go to the Olympics. But it was such a satisfying sport for me, because I was able to just focus on getting myself a little bit faster, taking a tenth or two off of my 100-meter free or whatever it was. And so that year in the sport of triathlon, I went from trying to be the champion to getting that personal satisfaction out of the journey, out of the training, out of seeing that, yeah, I am a little bit more fit than I ever have been before. Is it enough to win? I don't know, but I don't care now.
Yeah, cool. In your athletic life, what was your darkest moment?
I would say the darkest moment was probably the year before 1989. And it was in 1988, my 6th Ironman in Hawaii. Dave Scott pulled out of the race 2 days, actually the night before the event. We heard that he had some problems with his knee and he wasn't able to compete. And so all of a sudden I thought, oh my God, I looked at the start list of all the other athletes, and I had beaten every single one of them. And I thought, this is going to be my year to win, And so I went into the race the next morning feeling completely confident, I had a great swim. I came out of the water, and literally 5 minutes into the bike ride, I got a flat tire. And I thought, okay, just hold it together, stay calm, change the tire. I changed the flat, went off. Halfway through the bike ride, I got a second flat tire. And now it's getting harder to hold myself together. I had 2 spare tires. So, I used the first one on that first flat. The second flat came, I changed that, I got back on the bike. About 20 miles later, I got a third flat tire. The only 3 flat tires I got the entire career that I was training or racing in Kona. And at that point, then I didn't have any more spare tires. I had to wait for the support vehicle. It took almost 15 minutes. I was completely out of range of winning the event. And I came in off the bike. A couple miles into the run, I said, forget it, I'm just going to quit. And I started walking. But then my energy started to come back, and I thought, well, maybe I'll just finish, and I did finish, and I ended up in 5th place that year. But the thing that was so hard about that was that even on a day where Dave Scott was not at the race, my toughest rival, I still couldn't win. Something happened, and I just thought, I'm cursed. There's something about the island of Hawaii or the Ironman that is just not for me. And it was the darkest moment, because I thought, it doesn't matter what I do to get ready, I can't win it. And so I felt like that big dream or that big goal that I had just been ripped from my life. And that was why it was very hard to then the following year decide to actually go back. But again, the things that give us excitement to do training, to be committed to a goal, the reasons can change year to year. What was important last year for doing something big like that may not be the reason that excites us and motivates us the coming year. And so it was hard. It took a lot of searching inside to come up with that reason to go back in 1989. But fortunately, I did go back.
What were the lessons learned from that moment?
The lessons learned were, one, that it really is important to find something that has purpose and meaning and fulfillment that you can gain each and every day along the journey towards a big goal. Because if what you're doing day to day isn't satisfying, when you get to that end point of the test or the final exam or whatever it is, if you fail, it's very, very hard to sort of feel like, okay, let me just go on now, to not feel like you wasted a whole year. But if what you're doing each day has a certain amount of satisfaction and fulfillment, then by the time you get to that final test, you really don't care if it turns out the way you want or not, because you already have had so many great experiences. Ultimately, the training was so fun for me to just feel my body getting a little bit stronger, and to just perfect the way that my body moves, and to also develop just kind of that strength in my mind to be able to keep going and moving and being motivated. So, that's a big lesson, because there's, as you can see now, like in the time of this pandemic, a lot of our goals or dreams are impossible. There's no races, so athletes don't have events to compete in, and all of a sudden they're going, why should I keep training? And a lot of them have come full circle, and they're realizing, wait a minute, I'm training because, one, it reduces my stress. I feel healthy, I feel strong, I feel vibrant. It's something that I'm doing to bring better health to my life, and it's not so much about a race result or a personal best time or winning an event. It's really about just this day to day, what I'm doing. It's like a practice for life to become a little bit better yourself.
Cool. What was your best moment?
Well, I guess there were really 2 of them. Well, there were many over my 15 years of competition, but the first Ironman victory in 1989 was an incredible moment, just because it took 7 years to get there. But really, probably the greatest moment was my final Ironman in 1995. And there were a number of reasons why that was such an incredible day for me. First, I was trying to win 6 Ironmans in 6 starts. Nobody had done that. Dave Scott won 6 Ironmans during his career, but there was a loss in there. By the time I got to my final Ironman in 1995, this was going to be hopefully my 6th victory in 6 races. So that was one level of something that nobody had done before. I was 37 years old in 1995. If I could win, I would be the oldest champion up to that point in history. The day did not unfold the way I had hoped. In my mind, I thought, okay, I'm going to have a perfect race and maybe I'll set a world's record. I had all these perfect scenarios going. Well, I came off the bike 13 and a half minutes behind the leader. It was a 24-year-old triathlete named Thomas Hellriegel from Germany. And nobody had come from 13 and a half minutes behind to be the champion. So starting the marathon, I had to do something that nobody else had done before. And, a third level, and it just seemed impossible. And, starting out onto the marathon, I had to, I did the math and I had to make up 30 seconds a mile, every single mile of the marathon, if I was going to catch Thomas at the finish line. And that seemed completely impossible. And I couldn't even get my mind wrapped around that idea. And so the one thing that I was able to sort of comprehend or try and attempt was to just try to make up a second or a millimeter every single step of that marathon. And it's like, okay, that I can kind of manage in my mind. And so I set out on the marathon and I just tried to just stay calm and to keep my mind quiet, because it seemed impossible, but at the same time, that 1 second a step, a millimeter a step, slowly closing in on Thomas. And I knew if I could, it would be toward the end of the marathon, because that was such a huge gap. If he was 3 minutes ahead, let's say, I would have gone really hard in the beginning to try and catch him right away. But 13 and a half minutes, I knew I had to be very patient. When I had 8 miles to go, I got a time split and I was told that I was 4 minutes behind him. So I was making up the gap, but at the same time, I was still only on pace to catch him at the finish line. I was 37, he was 24, he's 13 years younger. Catching a guy who's 13 years younger than you near the finish line and you're sprinting for the finish is not a good idea. And so I knew that I needed more, but I just wasn't making up the time. And I had been studying shamanism, a way of life or a tradition, with a gentleman named Brant Secunda for a number of years at that point. And he teaches a tradition that comes from the Huichol people in central Mexico. And one of the things that the Huichol people say is that it's never over until it's over, meaning no matter how impossible something looks right now, take that next step, because in the next moment, things can turn around for you. And I was recalling those words that Brant had said to me over and over like that. And he also said, if you need help there in the race, call out to the Big Island, ask for help, because that island is alive. It's like a being, and it will hear you and it will help you. And so I just called out to the Big Island. I said, hey, Big Island, help me here. I need something extra, because I'm giving it everything I have, but it's just not enough. The next mile, I made up 40 seconds. The mile after that, I made up 50 seconds. The mile after that, I made up 1 minute and 15 seconds on Thomas Hellriegel, who had been leading the race for over 6 hours. Finally, at mile 23 of the marathon, with about 5 kilometers to go, I caught Thomas and I made the final pass of my Ironman career. And I went on to win that 6th title. Winning the title was great. But the thing that was most amazing about that day for me was that there really were just so many moments where I wanted to quit. I wanted to give up, where, my mind was telling me all those negative thoughts that don't help out. Hellriegel, he's so far ahead, I can't catch him. He's 13 years younger than me. I shouldn't have come back for this 6th title, to try it. It's not worth it. And every time that would happen, I had to just go, okay, pull it back in, get your mind to be quiet. I'd find that space of quiet inside it. And this was also something that Brant taught, because the Wheatfield people value the ability to quiet their minds. They say when we're quiet, then we can hear the answers to the big questions in life. And I was trying to find the answer of how can I win this thing, and it wasn't coming. It wasn't coming. It wasn't coming. But I also knew that I had to try to just get quiet. And every time that happened, and I got quiet, my shoulders would relax, my breathing would slow down, my stride would become smooth again, and I would just focus on giving everything I had in that moment and not worrying about the finish line, which was way down the road. And so those small little victories over that part of ourself that could say it's not worth it and just give up, those are very empowering. And that's something that we all have to do many times in life, where we have to go, forget about this looking impossible. Let me just give everything I have, because isn't that what life asks? Life is asking us to give everything we have, even though there is no guarantee that in the end, it's going to turn out the way we want. And so that was actually what made that race really the greatest race of my Ironman career.
Yeah. And I've written that down for a later point, but you just mentioned it. You talked about the champion's mindset, or the state of a champion's mindset, which is quiet and at peace. How do we have to understand that? So you are quiet on the inside, but active on the outside?
Yeah. And it's interesting because it's real easy to be quiet when you're sitting in a chair or sitting under a tree and life is beautiful. It's very, very different to be able to get yourself to be quiet in the middle of something as chaotic as the Ironman, and something as intense as the Ironman. And so I practice this a lot. The more you practice just being quiet, the easier it gets to get back into that space when you are in those intense moments with intense challenges right in front of you. And so, in my training, when I was swimming or biking or running, there was usually something in almost every training session where I would find myself going, oh, I'm tired, I want to quit. I should have done a shorter ride instead of this long one, or whatever it is. I would just take a breath and just try to let all of that noise go and then get back into that quiet space. And so I practiced this over and over and over and over and over. And I like I said, I practiced that in workshops with Brant, where he would say, we're going to watch the sunrise, or we're going to watch a sunset, or we're going to sit by this river and just take in the sound of that water. And as you do that, you can feel this quiet come into you. And it's not quiet like you're asleep, like that. It's more like a quiet where all of a sudden you stop focusing on yourself and what you want and feel you need, and you become aware of the world all around you, and it's that awareness of sort of being connected to life that is also like self-confidence. When we're isolated and we feel like we're the only ones who are having a hard time, you feel disconnected from life, and you feel weak in a sense. But when you can just be quiet and shift that focus from having to have everything perfect for me to suddenly seeing the trees and in the race, seeing the lava, seeing how beautiful that big island is, you feel connected to life. And when you feel that connection to all of life, you can also connect to energy or life force, and you can feel this ease come back in. And so that's what I call the champion's mindset. And you hear a lot of athletes talk about that, where they're like in this flow, let's say, where time just passes quickly, and all of a sudden, you've run 2 kilometers, and it's like, wait, where did those 2 kilometers go? It's like it happened like that. That's very different than when you're struggling, and each step is like a lifetime. But everybody can practice this. Nobody is just born with it. You have to practice it, and the more you practice getting yourself to be quiet. That's the champion's mindset. And, you know, so many times you're searching for the answer or the solution to something. And when you're thinking and trying to find it, it doesn't come. And then all of a sudden you're daydreaming somewhere, and all of a sudden, oh yeah, now I know what I need to do to solve this problem that I've been working on. And it's interesting because Albert Einstein said some of his greatest insights came when he was just riding his bike.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the way it is also in sport. Like in that race with Thomas, it wasn't until I got to 8 miles to go in the race where the answer finally came. It's like, Brant said, call out to that island. It's like, oh yeah. And I called out, and all of a sudden everything started to shift. And so you just, it's not easy necessarily if you haven't practiced it. It is easier if you have practiced getting your mind to be quiet. When you're quiet, you don't need to feel good to keep going. And if you feel lousy, it doesn't affect you the same. When you're quiet, your legs are still going to hurt. It's still going to be hot. It will still be challenging, but all of that challenge doesn't affect you quite the same. So it's like all of a sudden you're kind of watching a movie of yourself in this race, and it doesn't affect, the negative things don't affect you, and you feel this ease and this strength and this confidence that comes from having value in just giving everything you have each and every step of the way.
Really cool. If you could travel back in time, what advice would you give your younger you?
I would have told myself in the very beginning, don't worry about the outcome of the race, or really bring it back to basics of finding something that has meaning each and every day in your training. And if I had done that, I think I could have probably won the race much earlier, won the Ironman much earlier.
Yeah, and more often.
Yeah, perhaps.
One question I had in my mind when you talked about the last Ironman you did you know before the race that it was your last one, or you decided after the race that's it?
I knew before I started that it would be my final Ironman. And, as an athlete, there were a lot of different things that I wanted to put into my training each year, but I just wouldn't really know if something was truly effective until I had actually carried it through the whole season. I mean, some stuff you try in your training, right away, like, okay, this isn't going to work. But a lot of things, it takes the entire season to see if they are actually working. And so each year there were one or two new little things that I was trying. And each year I felt like those new tools or ways of training were helping me continue to get faster and faster. In 1995, I kind of reached into the bottom of my bag of tricks and pulled out everything that I could. And so I knew going into the race in that Ironman in 1995 that there was nothing more I could do to get better in the future. And so I thought, you know what? Win, lose, or draw, this is going to be the best this is the best that I can bring into this thing called the Ironman triathlon in Hawaii. And so there was no reason for me to actually come back another year, because for me, a lot of what I was doing was trying to be just a little bit better each year, bring a little bit more into the sport, bring a little bit more into my performance there on race day. And so, yeah, I knew going into it that was going to be the final race. And in some ways that freed me up to actually give everything I had, because I knew there would be no more tomorrows. There would be no more next year. And so I really wanted to go out feeling like this was the ultimate race for me.
What are the habits that make you a successful athlete and person?
A couple things I think that are very important, at least for me. One was to be patient. Obviously, I would have liked to have won the Ironman the second time or the fourth time or the fifth time, but to wait till 7 years, that took a lot of patience. But through that patience, through those years where I had very difficult bad races, I also learned things that helped me to then be able to win 6 Ironmans in a row. Had I not had all of those tough races where I fell apart, I wouldn't have had the tools to then go on and win 6 races. As an example, one of the years when I was in the lead, I was leading the race. I had 10 miles to go in the marathon. I had a 5-minute lead over Dave Scott, and the gap was getting bigger. I thought, I've got this thing. This was in 1987. All of a sudden, I could tell that my nutrition wasn't working and my energy levels were starting to drop. And so I started to try to take in more calories to get more energy into my body, and it wasn't working. Eventually, I had to slow down, and then I was walking. And when I started to walk, I go, this is it. Dave's going to pass me. If I'm walking, 5-minute gap is just going to evaporate. And so as I was walking, I would walk and I would jog, I would walk and jog. And finally, Dave Scott passed me. And then I had to ask myself, should I just quit? Do I just walk and give up? Or what do I do? And I realized, you know what? My body's working at about 20% of my peak capacity right now. But I can get 100% out of this 20% situation. And so that's what I did. I committed to saying, you know what, even when I'm walking here, I'm going to walk as fast as I can. And then when I can jog, I will jog as fast as I can, as long as I can, until I have to walk again. And so even though I didn't win that year, I knew that I got everything out of my performance that I could. And that skill helped me, because go fast forward to all of those races where I was able to win. Sometimes during those days, I felt 100% like this is the best I can be. And then my energy would drop a little bit, and maybe I'd be at like 80% or 70%. Had I not had that tough race a couple years earlier, when I was at 70%, I may have given up. But instead, I said, I'm going to get 100% out of this 70% moment. And then my energy would come back up, and then I'd be back at 100%. And so it helped me to just really stay present and focused and giving everything I had, whether I was feeling perfect or whether I was feeling like, oh boy, this is a tough patch. And so anyway, there were many lessons like that I learned through the difficult races that enabled me to then put together those 6 amazing victories.
Yeah, cool. Talking about habits, you spoke about the importance of sleep.
Mm-hmm.
Talk us through that. So how much did you have a routine prior bedtime? Anything we need to know about sleep?
Well, I was a great sleeper, and when you sleep, your body recovers. If you don't get enough sleep, your body does not recover quite the same. That was actually, I think, kind of one of my secrets. I slept 9 or 10 hours every night. I would take naps many times during the day. And a lot of the other athletes, they'd stay up late and they'd get up early, and their body just wasn't absorbing the training the same as I was able to. They've actually done some studies recently to take athletes who they know are not getting quite enough sleep. They make them sleep an hour, 2 hours more. Their performance just completely takes off after that. And so, recovery is just as important as what you do in your training. And so I was very good at the recovery part of my racing. And even at the end of the season, when the Ironman was done, a lot of athletes that I was competing against, they would take 2 or 3 weeks easy, and then they would get back at it and they'd start training thinking, okay, I'm going to really get in shape early so that next year I'll hopefully have better results. I would take 1 or 2 months very easy to let my body really regenerate and to put the energy back in that I put out throughout the season. And I think that's one of the reasons why I was able to sustain that world-class level for so many years.
Yeah, that's an interesting one, because in your sport, somehow you are dependent on high training volumes, right? So in order to get the adaptations. But then on the other side, as you said, the adaptations only work if you recover from the stimulus. Mm-hmm. How did you find out, or how did you feel that you were recovered? Was it a feeling, or how could you make that you needed a month or 2? What were your measures?
Well, you kind of have this After the Ironman, every year, I would just feel tired, physically tired, but also mentally tired. Because there were many days in training where I knew I had key workouts that I had to get in, but maybe I wasn't in the mood to do that workout. But it's like, it doesn't matter whether I'm in the mood or not. I have to get it in today because it's part of this whole progression of fitness that I need to get, so that on that one day that does count, I can put together a great race. That took a lot of mental energy, and so I would just kind of take it easy. I would do other activities, like I surfed a lot in the off season. I would do a little bit of running, and maybe once or twice a week I'd get on my bike and just spin easy. But a lot of it was just active recovery kind of movement or exercise. And eventually, I would start to feel a shift. So, I'm mentally exhausted. The thought of getting into any kind of a structured training sounded terrible, but eventually, after a month or a month and a half or 2 months, there would be this shift, and I could feel it, like, oh, I'd start thinking about, what can I do in my training this year to get a little bit better, and all of a sudden I see that I'm starting to, uh, instead of riding 1 or 2 days a week easy, I'm on the bike 3 or 4 days a week. And then I'm running, instead of running 3 days a week, I'm running 4 or 5 days a week. And then, there's just like this natural shift that would happen. And then usually sometime after around January 1st every year, I'd be like, okay, let's get back at it. So it wasn't a structured thing necessarily, but it was more just this feel like, I'm ready now.
Yeah. And staying active in the times where you didn't feel like it.
Yeah, it wasn't like I just sat on the couch for 2 months. Yeah.
Talking about sleeping, do you have a morning routine?
Well, I usually get up, have a cup of coffee, go for a workout, and that's what I did during my training. Usually, I would get up in the morning, and either do a run or do a swim, and then come back, have breakfast. And then, since the cycling took a lot more time than the other two sports, then I usually got on my bike and then would do a bike ride. And sometimes it was only an hour, hour and a half. Sometimes it would be 5, 6 hours, and then get back from the ride, and then usually do the sport, whichever sport that I didn't do early in the morning. So some mornings, if it was a swim, then I'd come back from the bike ride, I'd do a run. Some days I did them all in a row, but a lot of days I spread them out over the entire day. So, get up, do that swim workout, come back, have breakfast, go do a bike ride, 3, 4, 5, 6 hours, come back, have lunch, take a nap, and then in the evening go for a run. And so it was a good rhythm. That's all I had to do. I did it professionally, so I had the luxury of taking all day to get the training in.
How do you prepare yourself for important moments?
I had to plan. When I knew, I set my race schedule before I even started training each year, so that, if I had my 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 races that I was going to do throughout the season, then that helped me to structure all of my training so that I could hit a peak on each one of those days that counted most. I would have several different strategies of how I wanted to race, depending on how the day unfolded, because I know how I want my body to be, but I didn't know how the other racers were going to approach the event. And so I had to be able to adapt to what was going on the race day. And then I also had, part of my strategy was to just be willing to surrender to dealing with a situation that maybe I hadn't even planned on. For example, 1995, I hadn't planned on having somebody 13 and a half minutes ahead of me going into the marathon. That was completely unexpected. But I also was ready to deal with something that was unexpected. And that enabled me to still try to basically stay calm and relaxed and steady and focused, even when something was like, oh my God, how am I going to do this? a lot of the athletes that I competed against didn't have that as part of their strategy, to be willing to just manage something completely unexpected. And so when something like that happened, they freaked out. And it was interesting because at the awards in 1995, almost all of the top 10 guys came up to me and they said, "How did you do that? I would have just given up if I was that far behind. You know, there's no way I would have been able to hold it together. How did you do that?" And it was just an interesting perspective to see.
Yeah, I believe that. How do you overcome setbacks?
Uh, yeah, that's a great question. The first thing I would do when I had a setback was to just have it be okay to be disappointed or upset or bothered by the setback. You know, if I walked on the marathon, I didn't cross the line and go, "Wow, that was great." I was like, "That was terrible." And I just allowed myself that time to be disappointed. And then I would give myself a week or 2 weeks before I really tried to figure out, why did that happen? Because when you're in the middle of that disappointment, you're not clear. And it's very difficult to have a sort of distant perspective on it, to ask yourself, okay, why did that happen? The solution you come up with in that moment of disappointment is usually not going to be the thing that's going to actually help you turn it around the next time. And so I would give myself time until I could feel like, okay, the disappointment is settling. And then I could start to feel like, okay, now I'm clear enough to look back and go, why did that happen? Oh, okay. It happened because of these three things that I did, or these three things that I didn't do. And then you could create a strategy to then hopefully the next time not have that same scenario take place. But a lot of the people that I raced against, they tried to come up with the solution the next day of what was going to help them to change that and not have it take place again. But again, in that disappointment, the solution you come up with is probably not really going to be the right one.
Yeah. And that also comes full circle with what you said earlier, right? You need to get some distance and then look at it, and then the solution will come to you.
Yes. Yeah.
Who's your role model and why?
Um, well, early in my career, the role model that I had was Dave Scott. He was the best guy in the sport, and even though I was competing against him, I thought, he knows how to race this event. Let me see what it is. Try to figure out what it is that he's doing to be so good. And so he was a great role model in terms of, he was setting the standard for everybody else in the sport to follow. And I was just trying to figure out how to be at that level and then a little bit better. Another person that was a great role model for me was Carlos Lopes from Portugal, great marathoner. He won the Olympics, the Olympic gold medal. I think he was 37 years old when he won it, 37 or 38. And at that time, I was in my early 20s, and it just blew my mind that somebody that old could be that good. And so that really set it in my mind, like, you know what? I'm not going to be at my best at 25 or 26. I might be able to be my best at 35 or 36 or 37. And so that was really the beginning of having it be a possibility that I could race for many years.
What is the best advice you received and who gave it to you?
Probably, the best advice really did come from Brant Secunda. When, like I said, some of the things that he would say over and over, like, it's never over until it's over. Take that next step, and that was such a great tool. And he also emphasized that it really is important to just be steady. He said, never let yourself get too excited or let yourself get too low in terms of, feeling disappointment or like something's impossible. And so I was always trying to race and train from that real steady point. And when you have that sense of steadiness, it's like you're connected to another aspect of what I would call a champion's mindset, which is to feel very peaceful, yet sense your potential, your power. And that was something that really attracted me to Brant, because he really does have this sense of peace, but also being powerful at the same time. And when I talk about power, it's more like you feel this trust in life, like no matter how something is going to turn out, it's going to be okay. And that's, when you're in a race and you think, oh, I'm not going to win, you think your life is going to be death and doom, and nothing's going to be good in your life anymore. But when you realize, wait a minute, even if I get second or fifth or 10th, or maybe don't even finish, my life will still go on. I will still have my friends, my family. The sun is still going to rise tomorrow when I wake up, and life will still be beautiful in that sense. And that really gives you this ability to give everything you have, even without that guarantee that the day is going to turn out the way you hope. And that trust is also something that Brant emphasized. He said, just trust in life, trust in yourself, trust in the big island. And that gives this ease, or this, okay, I'm going to give everything I have. And when I did that, the most amazing things happened. It kept me going in that race with Hellriegel. That's why I was able to win that 6th title, one of the reasons. And so, these are just simple things that he said, but to live them is where the real impact comes.
Yeah. Now I have an interesting one.
Yeah.
I heard you speak on a podcast that trusted people in your network said you shouldn't go to the Ironman anymore because it wasn't for you, right? You outlined already, you went, you didn't succeed, you went, you didn't succeed, and so on. But then you also said in the same podcast, we need to have trusted people. So how would you distinguish between which advice to listen to and which advice not to?
Yeah, it really is important to have those close people that will tell you things that you're unwilling to see about yourself. And in early 1989, actually after the race in 1988 in Kona, where I got those flat tires, my close circle of trusted advisors, they were all saying, don't go back. There's something about that race that's just not for you. Go race in Europe, go race in Australia, go race in all the places where you have shown you can be a champion, where you've shown that you can beat Dave Scott. And I was like this close to saying, yeah, you're right. I shouldn't go back to that event. But in the winter of 1989, in January, early January, I could just feel that there was something that was not complete for me. And that's when it came, wait a minute, I've been trying to win, but I haven't really been focused on having my best race. And that was that was the moment where I realized, no, there is that one thing that has importance, and one reason that I do have to go back to Hawaii to race one more time, to just have my best performance there. And so, sometimes your closest trusted advisors will tell you something that you need to hear. And other times they will tell you something that they see, but inside you also know that there's something deep that has meaning, that has importance to you, to continue on with that journey. So again, it's not black and white. It's not like, oh, they're always going to have the right answer, or, oh, I'm always going to have the right answer. Sometimes they will, sometimes you will.
Back in the days, how did a typical training day look like?
Well, my weeks were, there were times of the year where I was doing short, fast training, other times of the year where I was doing very long training, depending on the races that I had. But generally, I would swim 4 to 5 days a week. I was cycling 5 or 6 days a week, and I was running 6 or 7 days a week. The average training was between 3 and 5 hours total each day. Some days were shorter than that. Other days might even be longer than that. And so, it was just a variety of, some days were short and fast, other days were longer and more steady. Some days were easy recovery. But mostly it was just doing training that was kind of pushing me or testing me but at the same time that I knew that the next day I'd be able to get up and do some more training. It would be very easy to do training that would push my body to the limit and then I'd be completely exhausted. That would be easier to do than to do that training that pushes me, but not too far that I get overtrained. And that was the balance. You know, you're always trying to get a little bit more out of your body, push it and test it, but at the same time, making sure that it's not too much. And that was the fine balance, or the art in training.
Yeah. And you were famous for doing only a few races a year. Mm-hmm. What was your philosophy behind this approach?
I wanted to have each race be a real peak performance. A lot of athletes would enter a lot of races hoping that one or two or three or four of them would be good. And I tried to make it, I did a lot less racing so that when I went into each event, I was hoping that every single one would be a really good performance. I also knew that, racing, if you race really hard and give everything you have, it takes time to recover from that. And so I really wanted to honor my body and not over race. And I think because of that, I did have a long career, and I did have a lot of top three finishes, probably more than most of the guys. Like, again, it's easy to overtrain, and it's also easy to over race. And I had seen how a lot of the athletes who were racing 10 and 15 races a year, they just seemed to be a little bit below their potential every time they went out. And so I thought, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to race 6 or 7 times a year. And because of that, I saw that every time I went out, I actually did have a pretty good performance. And I could count on having a good race that way also, because I could train, I could prepare, I could taper down, I could get fresh and rested. And then I also knew that then I could have my best performance out there.
Yeah, cool. Talking about coaching, you talked about the importance of science as well as experience in coaching. And you shared a very powerful story that science proved a marathon in a triathlon could not be run faster than a certain time, but you proved that it was possible. Can you share that story?
Yeah, clearly it's important to look at science when you're thinking about how you're going to train. And as I do as a coach, Mark Allen Coaching, because our physiology has certain aspects that, you need to take in a certain amount of calories if you're going to sustain your effort. You need to take in a certain amount of fluids and eat healthy and all that kind of stuff. I was at a coaching conference in Finland a number of years ago, and one of the presenters was Tim Noakes from South Africa, who, he's like the guru of endurance athletics and training. And he presented some research that he was doing at the time. And he said, every single person on the planet has the exact same upper limit on how fast we can get carbohydrates into the working muscles to create energy for movement. And he said, because we all have this same maximum speed that we can get energy into the cell, he said, I've done calculations and I've shown that because of this upper limit, it is completely impossible to run 2 hours and 40 minutes for the marathon in Hawaii at the Ironman. And he said, and he pointed to me, I was in the audience. He goes, there's a guy sitting here who has shown that even though science says it's impossible, he's shown that it is possible, because my best marathon in Kona was 2 hours, 40 minutes and 4 seconds. And so he the guru of endurance athletics, said, so what that shows us is that science doesn't know everything. And I just love that he was still like a kid exploring all of this stuff. And so, as a coach, there's a lot that I know from science, and then there's a lot that I know from experience that science hasn't. It doesn't mean that science is showing something different. That just shows that science may not, as he said, know everything up to this point. And so that's kind of how I coach my athletes, based on science and also based on what I've experienced over the years and also seen work for athletes.
Yeah. And talking about coaching, you have accumulated knowledge over decades that you are giving back to people now through
Mhm.
the Mark Allen coaching. What do people get if they sign up with you?
My coaching is at markallencoaching.com, and I have memberships. That's a monthly membership, and people go on and they enter information about their current training, their past training history, and the race target races that they have, and then training plans are created around all of that information. All of my training intensities are based on heart rate training zones. I think that's the best way to set your intensity levels so that you optimize the time that you put into your training. You're training hard, but not too hard, and you can recover. People get, several, I take them through like a base building phase and then move them into speed work and then down, and then I taper them down for their key races. It's great now because I can train people all over the world. There's, people have their devices that track what they're doing in their training, and all of that information uploads into their workout calendars. And I look at that each day and see what's going on. And so I can see when somebody is improving, or I can see when maybe they're a little bit tired because something's off. And it's like, hey, what's going on? It looks like you didn't, that workout was a little different than normal. And they go, well, yeah, I didn't get enough sleep last night, or, my job is killing me, or, whatever it is. And then we adapt the training based on that. And so it's a real nice way to have keep track of what people are doing, and to also get them excited when I see that things are improving the way we hope to.
Yeah. And it's markallencoaching.com. And it's
Yes.
for all kind of levels, right? So it's for beginner, intermediate, as well as advanced, elite.
Yeah, all levels. And the only difference between somebody beginning and somebody who's been doing the sport for 20 years is that their training zones are going to be a little bit different, and that's taken into account. And then also just the speed that somebody goes as they progress through years of training. They do get faster. Of course, that's also dependent on your age, but training, if it's easier, it would be easier as a coach to give people too much, or too much fast stuff, or too much volume. It's like I said, it's harder to give people stuff that is sustainable, that they can be consistent with their training. But consistency is what makes you a better athlete. Consistent training makes you faster, and that's really what I try to give people.
Yeah, really cool. Do you want to nominate someone to be interviewed?
Oh, I would love to hear some stories from Jan Frodeno. He's an amazing athlete, set the world's record in Kona last year. He's had an incredible career, going from a gold medal in Beijing to being an Ironman champion. And it would just be interesting for me to hear kind of what some of his training is, and how he approaches overcoming disappointment, because he won Ironman in 2016. That was his second victory. And then 2017, he had something like a back spasm, and he ended up having to walk the marathon. 2018, he didn't even get to the start line because he got a stress fracture. I think it was in his hip or something. And then 2019, he came back after 2 disappointing years and just absolutely crushed the field. And so it would be really interesting for me to hear how he did that. How did he pick up the pieces? What did he do in his training? How has he adapted as he gets older? Because he was 38 years old last year when he won the Ironman. And then also, how is he going to go forward in 2021? Because there was no Ironman World Championship this year. The race didn't take place because of the pandemic. And so how has that affected what he's doing? I think it could be a real interesting interview.
Oh, absolutely. What else is going on in Mark Allen's life at this moment in time? Coaching people and
coaching people. I've been doing that for about almost 25 years now, coaching triathletes. One of the things that I've been working on with my business partner, Scott Zagarino, is we are actually both 62 years old. And so what I've kind of been working on behind the scenes since I turned 50 was figuring out, how do you keep strong and healthy and active as you age? Because it's almost like people have this, there's like the under 50 years old crowd that is still like competitive and strong. And then it's sort of like you hit 50 and all of a sudden everybody thinks you're an old person. And it's like, no, that's not true. And so I've been really working on putting together ideas and concepts of how somebody in their 50s and 60s and 70s and onward can maintain that really healthy lifestyle. Peak performance is one aspect. Longevity and lifetime health is a different aspect of how you train, how you exercise, how you eat, how you sleep. And so I'm working on kind of a program that really is designed to help people stay healthy all the way to the very end. And so stay tuned for that.
And this will be available. Where can we find it in the future?
I'm trying to figure out actually the best way to deliver that. And I don't know if it'll be something I'll be doing individually or if I'll be partnering with some companies. There's a number of companies that I'm talking to right now. So I can't reveal anything quite yet, but it'll come out.
Okay. It's definitely a worthwhile project, I think.
Yeah.
Where can people find you?
Yeah, you can go to markallencoaching.com, go to services, and you'll see all the coaching that I offer. Also, if people do have questions, you can email me, mark@markallencoaching.com. Also, Brant Secunda and I teach a workshop called Fit Soul, Fit Body. And in there, we integrate those two themes of, mind, body connection. And it's really, that's a great program. You can go to fitsoulfitbody.com and you'll be able to see all the information on that. We didn't have any workshops this year because of the pandemic, but next year, hopefully those will be back on the calendar. And we teach those all over the world. We have taught them in Europe, here in the US, down in South America. So a lot of great programs there.
What's the duration of the workshop?
They're usually Friday, Saturday, Sunday, but sometimes we've done like 5 days, so it's more almost like a training camp in a sense. So it just depends. Yeah.
Really cool. Okay. Mark, thanks a lot for your time. That was awesome.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.